What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Hopefully you had a fun weekend, safe weekend, even though it's Black Friday. I know it gets kind of crazy out there. Hopefully you got some cool stuff on Black Friday. I looked through some of the comments, and it looked like you guys got some pretty good stuff. PS4s, Switches, even some Xbox One X's, despite them not being on sale, which is kind of interesting because we are going to talk a little bit about what the MPD analysts had to say about November, because it looks like it's going to be a very interesting November when it comes to reporting really different sales numbers and everything. That actually ended on November 25th, by the way. It's not going to go all the way to the end of the month, according to Matt Priscatella. Sorry, Matt. But it's going to be very interesting there. Now, we do also have some other stuff to talk about today, including Destiny 2 and a possible Nintendo Direct coming soon. Let's get started. So there's an interesting trend that always seems to happen when it comes to Nintendo Direct speculation. For the most part, when a slot becomes available on the Nintendo Direct webpage that lists them, most people automatically assume, because, well, it tends to be right every time, that there is a Nintendo Direct coming soon. Like, generally, they're getting that spot ready to then put the big slide there that's like, hey, Nintendo Direct, this is what's happening, or this is what did happen on that date. So now everyone is in like full Nintendo Direct speculation mode right now. Is it going to be in December? Is it going to be getting ready for one in January? We kind of figure one is going to happen in January. However, I, like many, do think a Nintendo Direct is coming soon. And I think it's going to be mostly for the Zelda DLC, the big Zelda DLC, the big story DLC. Now, of course, we have a season pass, and we've had previous DLCs that were a little smaller. It's all kind of been building up to this really large one that's still apparently coming out in December, despite us not really knowing much about it. And a Nintendo Direct would really smooth that out. Now, of course, a lot of people believe this is just for the January press event, really, when they're going to talk about all kinds of stuff at Nintendo Direct, get us ready for 2018. And a lot of people believe that the Zelda DLC will be shown off completely in the Game Awards. So the Game Awards coming up in a couple weeks. However, I don't think that's enough time. Like, we got a trailer last time, right? And it was like small for Breath of the Wild. It gave us a small little bits of information. I think that's the first time we saw Zelda, I believe. And a lot of people thought it was like a female Link and everything. You remember that? But here's the thing. I think based on them doing directs for things like even Xenoblade, for example, even ARMS, I think they could get a 10 to 15 minute direct just out of the Zelda DLC if they do it right, especially if there's really that much content. It really feels like this big season pass that they sold us when it came out has all been building up to what is the prominent piece. I think 80% of this is going to be this story DLC, as many others believe as well. That's apparently what's going to be worth the price tag. Sure, some of the other stuff was really cool, but everyone's been looking forward to this big add-on to the story, this big DLC. Apparently it's going to open up all kinds of cool stuff in the game. So I think, yes, a Direct will be coming, and it has to be soon if this is still coming out in December, because we need to know what we're buying. And it's going to probably be about the Zelda DLC, as far as we can tell, the last DLC, although there is always a possibility that they then introduce more DLC coming down the line in this Direct as well. So that's my thought on this, guys. Let me know what you think down below. Do you think they're going to... I mean, there's also the thought that they show up in December with a Direct, and they just start telling us all about 2018. And it seems like it's a double-edged sword with this, right? Because on one side, you're kind of telling people, hey, what's coming out at Christmas time? You don't need that, because all this other cool stuff's coming out. And on the other side, people are saying, well, if you get them just excited for stuff coming out next year, they'll go out this holiday season and buy what's there along with the Switch in anticipation of that. So it can go either way. And I'm curious where you guys fall on this. Do you think it's going to be something where they just start announcing 2018 games? Or is it going to be mostly about the Zelda DLC pack that we're still waiting for? Let me know. Next up, we got some pretty cool footage for Resident Evil Revelations 2. Now, of course, that double pack is out tomorrow. And it's going to be very interesting to see because a lot of people probably didn't play Revelations 2 much at all that probably have a Switch right now. And even if you're an Xbox One or PS4 owner, if you're a new owner, maybe you missed Revelations 2. Maybe you didn't play it on the computer or even the Vita. I remember I saw it on the Vita and I was like, really? It's on there? That's interesting. So here's the deal. We saw some footage. I saw this on YouTube, and it's a direct comparison between the Xbox One version and the Switch version, and visually, it's very close. Like, it's closer than I thought it would be. Now, here's the thing. Frame rate is different. As far as I can tell, it's 30 frames on the Switch, and it's unlocked, or probably just 60 frames is the roof on the Xbox One, because even the Xbox One version seemed to stutter at times in the video. Now, it could be the recording process. A lot of times, I tell people, get the game in front of you and play it for an hour, and then you'll know how stable the game is, right? How it actually looks on your TV, because even when you go through streams, you still get compression, bit rates, this whole thing that can really mess up how a game looks. However, just looking at the Switch version and looking at the Xbox One version, very, very close. I also noticed some weird things going on in the Switch version with the main character's hair, her ponytail. It was doing some odd stuff. It's a possibility that maybe some of that in her jacket too, maybe some of the animation on that. The frame rate there is lower even. We've seen those tricks before too, where different things have smaller frame rates or lower frame rates in animation. But man, that is very, very close. It's definitely using all the same effects and everything. So wow, it's looking good. The Tegra is definitely up there in terms of what it can do with lighting and visual effects. It just happens to need lower frame rates to make everything come together. I feel like some people don't mind as much, but man, that 60 frames definitely looks smoother than the 30. But now I'm really curious, what does it look like in handheld mode? Because we've seen when they move it down to handheld mode, concessions are made further. So I'm curious what they've done to get it to work on the Switch handheld mode. Luckily, we won't have to wait long, right? People will probably be loading up tonight even at midnight or 3 a.m. or whatever to try it out. Next up, let's talk about Destiny 2 and a very interesting controversy that's happened here. Now, Destiny 2 has recently come under fire for apparently throttling their experience system. So what happens is you're playing the game normally, bam, you get 5,000 experience, your bar fills up X amount, you go on about your day, you keep playing, right? Well, during this past weekend, there was this event that happened last week where if you had people from your clan in, you would gain more experience, and people started to really check that experience bar as they gained experience because they noticed something. They were told they were given a certain amount of experience, but then their bar would fill up less than it did at other times. And of course, this is when you've hit the level cap, and at that point, you're building up your experience bar to then fill up, to then you get a bright Engram, and then you start over and do it again. And the Engrams are essentially random draws for cosmetics and weapons and all this stuff. And so people started to realize, wait a minute, it says I'm getting 5,000 experience or 2,500 experience, but the bar just filled up less than it did the last time I got 5,000 experience. So there was this big thing that happened on Reddit where somebody went through, they tested all the theories, and yes, they found that Bungie apparently has been throttling experience since it started. I mean, the proof was there. It was very clear that Destiny was in some way throttling experience. Generally, if you went really fast, so you did a lot of, according to them, like public events can be done very quickly, but if you take your time, like maybe you're doing Crucible and you got 10 to 12 minutes maybe between times of gaining experience, it would kind of stay normal. And then it turns out this was all correct because Bungie issued this statement. Currently, XP will scale up when playing longer or fixed duration activities like Crucible, competitive multiplayer matches, and the Leviathan raid, and XP will scale down when playing activities that can be quickly, repeatedly chained, like grinding public events. We are not happy with the results, and we've heard the same from the community. Effective immediately, we are deactivating the system. Now, according to players currently, I just saw this today, it sounds like while they turn this off, so it's pretty much straight across the board, if you gain 5,000 experience, it tells you gain that, your bar will fill up the exact same amount every single time. Apparently, they've now doubled the amount you need in terms of experience to fill that bar. According to one user, it was 80,000. Now it's 160,000. I have not seen any comment from Bungie on this, but it's very clear they don't want you to level up super fast, because there are microtransactions in the game. That seems to be the massive opinion here, is that Bungie is trying to, Bungie, Activision probably together, trying to make it a little harder on the players to level up because they do want those microtransactions to have some sort of effect. They don't want you to level up a bunch of times, get all the cosmetic stuff you can, and then there's no reason to buy those Engrams because as far as I could tell, they were shaders and cosmetics. But if you keep unlocking them that quickly, there's no need to. So they definitely want there to be some kind of barrier there. It's going to take you X amount of hours to level up, or you spend a little bit of money and you get this over here. So that seems to be not really the allegations, but the opinion, right? The prevailing opinion seems to be they're trying to force us into microtransactions. At least they figured that out. However, keep in mind the fact that throttling experience had to be discovered before Bungie decided to fix it. It's a little telling, isn't it? Next up, I want you to think back to Doom. Remember when that first came out on the PC, and you probably picked up the game and you're like, wow, this is never going to get better than this. This is amazing. I'm moving in 3D space. I'm slaying demons. I'm using rocket launchers and shotguns, and this is amazing. It's never going to get better than this. Now, I want to think back and just consider what could have made Doom better. And I know what you're going to say, and yes, you're absolutely right. It's loot boxes. At least according to modder Rip and Tear, this is exactly what the game needed, and what can only be described as a massive parody towards the video game market and loot boxes. Now, they added loot boxes into Doom, Doom with a very clever modification where you will find loot boxes, but then you also need to go find keys for those loot boxes, then open them and get random weapons. And it's actually really funny. You wouldn't have thought that adding these loot boxes into Doom would have made it more fun, and it's more hilarious than anything else, and I just think it's really funny to see. And people are having fun with it. You know, it's a different way to play Doom, so why not? But it's very funny to see different people just poke fun at the whole loot box. Really, everything that's going on with games now with loot boxes in a different way like this. I did load it up and just played around with it for a little bit. It's pretty funny. I recommend checking it out. And in our last bit of news, let's talk a little bit about the NPDs that are coming up. It should be December 14th, December 15th, depending on how things go with them collecting the numbers. It did end November 25th, according to them. And according to Matt Priscatella in an interview here, he talks a little bit about where he thinks the market's going to go and what would actually happen if Pokemon released next year. Now, of course, NPDs are all based in the United States, so that's the market he's talking about. He's not talking about the rest of the world, which we already know Japan is going to go nuts for Pokemon when it comes out on the Switch. But he had a little bit to say about the Switch in the United States if Pokemon happened to come out next year, saying, "If Pokemon comes next year, I can easily see Switch outpacing Wii and taking 40+% share of the hardware market next year, but it does depend on if Pokemon is next year or not." So keep that in mind. In a market where the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One are still pretty strong, believe it or not, the difference between the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One in the United States is roughly 3.5 million units, so it's like 17 to 20 million. It's not that much of a difference, and the Switch is kind of, you know, it started off at 0, right, and it's going to be working its way up, but something, according to Matt, if they produce enough units and Pokemon's there, 40% of the market share in the US is pretty massive, because that means that 60% would be left over for the Xbox One and the PS4. I could see that because if Pokemon does show up next year, which is still, people are all trying to figure this out, is it going to show up? If it does show up, just the name alone will sell that game, as we saw with people didn't like Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, but it still sold crazy amounts. It's the name. The name is that big, guys. It really is. And what's interesting here is Matt also talks about the current for November NPDs being kind of a coin flip, and I can agree. When I went to my Walmart to do some Black Friday shopping, I noticed that all the PS4s were gone. There were still some Xbox One S's gone, the Xbox One X's were gone, and the Switch was all gone. So I feel like, in my mind, when I see this, PS4 selling out, wow, first of all, good job, Sony. Obviously, that $200 price point was a great decision. The Xbox One S was selling pretty well, too, at $190, and the X just, I don't know how many they had, but there were, from what I could tell, people around where the PS4 games and the controllers and the systems were stacked up at one point because they had one of those push pallets going on there. And they were all gone. So this is going to be interesting because $200 price point is a pretty big deal. But of course, the NPD also tracks on revenue. So the Xbox One X at $500, which is effectively, 1.5 times what the Switch, more than 1.5 times what the Switch sells for. So revenue-wise, I see the Xbox One X, or the Xbox brand in general, taking it. But who knows unit-wise? It could be PS4, it could be Switch. It's going to be interesting when we find out around December 14th or 15th who took home the top prize in the NPD. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for Newswave today. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. It always helps out. And make sure you subscribe if you enjoy any video game news. In the mornings, they go up 8 a.m. every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time. And let me know what you guys think about any of this stuff we talked about today. Is the Nintendo Direct coming? Do you think that's on the books already? Do you think it's going to be announced this week so we get a good look at the Zelda DLC? I think if they're willing to do it for things like Xenoblade and they do stuff for ARMS, I don't see why they wouldn't do one for this DLC that's supposed to be probably 80% of the DLC is going to be for this last one, as much as they touted it out for story. It's going to be very interesting. I need your comments on that, guys, though. I'm very curious. And what do you think about this whole Destiny thing with the experience being throttled so that it takes you longer if you're trying to grind away and farm experience? You think it's okay for them to do that, or are you really annoyed? Maybe you're a Destiny player, maybe you're a big fan of Destiny, and you're really, really annoyed with Bungie's decision on that one. Let me know down in the comments. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.